Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host Keith Crockford and today I am chatting with Phillipa Cherryson. Hello Phillipa.
Hello Keith, it's lovely to speak to you.
And to you. Now the podcast theme for today I suppose is everyday adventure and making the outdoors part of real life. And I know that you are involved with Adventure Queens, and anyone that listened to my podcast a few weeks ago, we learned all about Adventure Queens and what they do to provide access to the outdoors for women. But Phillipa, you are one of the Ordnance Survey's GetOutside Champions. You're a digital journalist and a lifelong outdoor explorer. And I've been told that your biggest belief is that outdoor adventures should be accessible and achievable to everyone. So what is your background then, and how did you get into all of this?
Oh, there's a story for you. So what I'm going to say to start with is I'm not a lifelong adventurer. And I think this is perhaps my message, is that it is never too late. I grew up, I don't know, in Hampshire in a normal sort of housing estate like everybody else. And my little adventures were confined to perhaps the occasional walk with my parents in the New Forest, that sort of thing. And I still remember the day that Chris Bonington reached the summit of Everest. And I wanted to do that because it looked exciting and amazing. And then I went to school the next day at primary and said, I want to do that because I'd seen it on Blue Peter. And they basically looked at me as if I was completely bonkers. And the general gist of it was, well, you're a woman and women don't do that. And that was it, really. You don't think about it. And there was always that feeling of wanting to be outdoors, of wanting to explore, of seeing those wonderful paths, you know, when you head off into the countryside or into a woodland or up a mountain or up a hill, and looking at them and going, I want to go up there, but not feeling that I had the skills, the fitness, the understanding to be able to do it, or anybody to go with. I wasn't very good at sport at school. My hand-to-eye coordination is appalling. So I was always the one, you know, at goalkeeper and netball and in Team B and things like that because I'm tall. So I was never successful at sport. I didn't like it. Got to hate it as a teenage girl. You know, you don't want to get undressed in front of other people. You don't want to, you know, do all that sort of stuff. And it was I just thought, well, that's not for me. So I concentrated on academia. I concentrated on passing my exams. You know, I went to university, I became a journalist. And I was incredibly lucky in my career. You know, I was a newspaper journalist on national newspapers. I was a television journalist. You know, I've sort of traveled to places. I reported on the war in Bosnia for a bit, covered miscarriages of justice. So all of those were incredible, and that was amazing. But there was always that, I want to still get out there. I drive past sort of mountains and look up them and think, I'd love to go up there. But I didn't have anybody to go with. And back then, because we're talking the 1990s, we didn't have social media. We didn't have those groups that you can join. You didn't have the holiday packages, you know, where you can actually go out with other people to explore. So it was very difficult to go, well, where do I take my first step? Because you think, well, I can't join a walking group because they all know what they're talking about and they all know what they're doing and I'm going to get left behind. So I just didn't do it. And I suppose it wasn't until I met my partner then, who was into the outdoors, that I started to actually get to go out and go up the mountains in the Brecon Beacons, because I was living in Cardiff at this stage. Because of him, I ended up moving to the Brecon Beacons and I started to explore. And finally, it's almost like a dream come true. You go up the mountains and you start to embrace that passion. You realize what everybody's been talking about and why they do it. But still, it was very limited to those little adventures on my doorstep, to those little sort of stepping out and not really knowing. I could. My mother's was a geography teacher, so I understood maps, but I couldn't go out with a map and compass and read it that well. So I didn't feel I had the ability myself to go exploring. So there was still that sort of thing holding me back. And it wasn't until I found out about Adventure Queens that I saw a trip to go and walk, um, to do a day walk. And I thought, well, why don't I go along? It was the Malvern Ridge. And so it was, we all met at one end, got a minibus to start, and then walked back. And it was the sort of thing you can't do yourself, which was great, So it's something I thought, this is worth going on because it's something I can't actually do myself. So I need some help to do it. And I was so nervous when I was driving up there. It was ridiculous. I mean, there's me who's professionally successful, has done well in my career. And I was driving along thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to turn around because they're all going to be faster than me. They're all going to be fitter than me. They're all going to be younger than me. Nobody's going to talk to me. And you go through this in your mind as you're driving there and you think, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But no, I didn't get left behind. People did talk to me. I loved it. And as a result, I then became the South Wales organiser for the Adventure Queens.
But I think what you said there is really important because, we hear that from people all of the time at the Bucket List Company in terms of, they want to go off on this crazy adventure. They want to go and do Everest Base Camp. They want to do Kilimanjaro, but they don't, the biggest thing we get all the time when we're speaking to people is, but I've got nobody to go with. And, it's about trying to convince people to make that next step and to book it. And then, all those apprehensions that you had then about going on that first walk, like that's exactly that, we're hearing that just on a bigger scale on trips. But as soon as they arrive at the airport, as soon as they start chatting to other people, because, let's face it, ultimately, adventure is great because everybody is in the same boat and generally has the same interests as you, or you have a common denominator to talk about. And, people's fears and apprehensions just disappear so quickly. And, we get it all the time. Oh, I wish I had done this sooner. I wish, I could be 3-4 trips in now if I had just taken that step when I first thought about it. And, that's not just women, that's men as well. It is a big step to, if I go and trek Everest Base Camp or Kilimanjaro, am I going to be fit enough to do it? Am I going to be the one at the back? I don't want to be slowing the group down. That's just common things, isn't it?
Oh, that is 100% because I organise little events, with Adventure Queens, weekends and day walks. And this is the biggest thing that I see is that, and it's the thing that I have the most respect for is somebody going along and going, right, I'm going to do this. And then watching them afterwards as they just realized just this was the best thing they could have done. And you watch them turning up looking really nervous and I know because I've been there. And then they end up coming to so many more. And we find that people, they take that first step. They might come on a walk or they might come on a weekend. And then suddenly they've signed up to go and do the Tour de Mont Blanc, with the travel company, or they're going to Everest Base Camp, or they're doing these just amazing things and going, I wish I'd done this 10 years ago, and it's exactly as you say. And I see it every single event I do. And every single trip I've been on, I see exactly the same. And I hear you. I really do.
Yeah. And I think, it's that. And also as well, you are expanding your friendship group. We see it so many times that somebody comes on a trip as a solo traveler and then they're going to book their next trip with somebody that they met on their first trip because they both want to go and do that. And actually, let's go and do that together because they're suddenly meeting people who are interested in the very things that they're interested in. So actually, it's friendship groups just get formed through adventure.
Oh, Keith, what can I say? This is so true. I mean, I've made so many of my friends from being outdoors, from going on these trips, from talking to people. There is just something about being with other people in the outdoors, about going on an adventure with them, about sharing that common interest, that, and also being outside of your comfort zone. I would actually say that, you might do a trip that's slightly trickier or puts you, as I said, outside your comfort zone. And it just makes those bonds stronger, because you've been through perhaps an exhilarating or a slightly scary experience together, and you've always got something to share. And so, I mean, I organised a through hike, and there were about 6 of us who'd never done one before. We're all still in contact. And from doing a little through hike in Wales, they've gone on, people have done Hadrian's Wall, they've done the Pennines Way, they've done the Tour de Mont Blanc, they've gone across Yosemite, they've gone to Everest Base Camp. I mean, those little first steps are amazing. And then your social group grows and grows because you all have this shared passion.
Well, I mean, we hear it all the time where, someone will call us up or send us an email, me and 3 friends want to do Kilimanjaro or Mount Toubkal. And then by the end of it, there's only one, the person that emailed in is the one that wants to do it. And the others have kind of all backed out. And, I find it really funny that, there's always a meme around, Facebook or whatever. And it's that, when you start off with the idea, there's 20 people who want to do it. And then the week before, it's down to 5 people who want to do it. And on the day, there's only one person who wants to do it. To get people together in your friendship group, generally, everyone always thinks it's a great idea to start with. But actually, it never really works out that way in the end, does it?
One of the adventure queens, she coined it one time. We were at a weekend do, and she stood there and she said, well, we're all here because none of our friends want to do this with us.
Yeah.
And I loved it because we've all made new friendships because of it.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? It's, and when I set up the Bucket List Company, I never really realised the community that we would have built within it. I just thought people would book a holiday and that would kind of be it. But actually, the biggest thing to come from the Bucket List Company is the community of people. And, I've just come back from a scuba diving trip in Gozo last week. Of that trip, I think there was only, out of 14 people, there was only 4 that I'd never met before on a previous trip.
I think it becomes addictive, doesn't it? Once you've done one, you just want to do more, don't you?
Yeah, and it's and it's great, and also as well, it was really interesting because, there's almost if I look at our client base in the Bucket List Company, there's kind of 2 distinctive groups that have travelled together, sort of fairly well over the last, sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID. Those 2 groups have generally done quite a lot of trips together. They didn't know each other before, but they always seem to be booking the same trips. And it's just very interesting that now, over the last sort of this year, really, those 2 groups have started interacting as well, because it's one of them from that group and 2 of them from that group have been on the same trip. And now they're kind of, the groups are now sort of becoming one big community now, whereas they were kind of smaller ones before. But as the mix happens, it kind of, people have different things on their bucket lists, and actually, well, I don't want to do that trip. That doesn't interest me. I want to do that one. And it kind of just rolls on from there, really.
And by doing that, you find new people who want to do different things that perhaps you hadn't even thought about doing before as well, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and I think as well, and you must see this in Adventure Queens in terms of the conversations that happen on trips. From my perspective, our best salespeople are our clients, because they've done multiple trips. And, someone will say, oh, I'm interested in doing that. And then they'll go, oh, I did that 3 years ago. It's brilliant. And, and you don't even need to talk about it, because actually your community sells the trips, or, encourages the trips, and, it says how great they are. And, and I think that's the biggest thing from the community perspective for us.
Isn't that fabulous, though? Because I think you just get this sense of excitement and also wanting to share it with other people as well. When you've had a great time with a group of like-minded people, and it's one of those ones, yes, it's a bucket list, but now it's going to be a memory, forever. You want to share it, don't you? Whether it's on social media, whether it's face to face, in every shape or form, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, looking through things that you've said and written in the past, and obviously we had a quick conversation before we started recording this podcast, and you've already been out for a walk this morning and taken the dogs out, and as you said, you live in the Brecon Beacons. You're at the bottom of Sugarloaf, and you've said that even short walks can reset your day. Why do you think we overlook the power of small adventures? Because obviously, from the bucket list company perspective, we're selling the big dream in terms of, it's an 8-day, a 2-week, a 3-week trip. But actually, that's not. Adventure starts a lot smaller than that, doesn't it?
Oh, I so agree. I mean, this is something I'm quite passionate about, is that adventure looks very different to different people. So for one person, it might be doing the fastest known time over a mountain, but to somebody else, it might be camping in your back garden for the first time. That doesn't mean anyone's better than the other, because to the person who's doing it, they're both as challenging. So if you've never sort of experienced the outdoors, just to actually leave a city, to actually camp out overnight, it's massive. It really is. I mean, I've seen sort of women doing their first ever camp out, and it's such a big thing, and something to celebrate. And it may be you're never going to go on and actually go, to these sort of base camp treks or anything like that. It might be that you think, this is what I enjoy. I might want to do historical sort of adventures. It might be that I actually do like my comforts, that I do want to have that taste of adventure, but I want to do it on my terms. So it's all about the individual. And sometimes I think we get that sort of side of it gets overlooked, in that we're celebrating these amazing athletes, but we're also forgetting about the importance of getting outside for our mental health, of pushing our own little boundaries that little bit further. So it might be taking your first trip by yourself, which is terrifying. It might be that you've always gone away with a partner. It might be that they may, you may have split up, they may have passed away, and you're suddenly by yourself thinking, whoa, I'm going to have to do a flight by myself. Oh my gosh, I've never had to holiday by myself. My children have left home now, and what do I do now? There's a lot of women out there who are almost feeling like teenagers again, because they're trying to work out who they are in their lives, and where they go from now, and having all those fears and uncertainty. So just actually booking a holiday is really, really big. I mean, that is an adventure in itself. So it might be that they go, I could manage a long weekend, and that's as far as I feel I can push it. And that's as big as doing a massive trip through the Himalayas, in my opinion. It might be something in the UK. I mean, that's big enough to actually, step outside your comfort zone. That's tough. And I applaud every single person who does it, whatever that comfort zone is, because, research has shown that as we get older, we have to keep our brains have neuroplasticity, and we have to actually keep trying to challenge what we've got in our lives as well, and not getting too comfortable, because then in a way we get too comfortable and we stop making new neural pathways. So in a way our brain stops growing as well. So it's really good for us mentally. I mean, I'm in my mid-50s now. I got my first pair of rock shoes when I was 50. So I'm not, I'm taking my time here, but it's something I'm also passionate about, that we want to keep adventuring, we want to keep exploring, and that might look different to a 20-year-old, or it might look different to a 30-year-old. But it's whatever works for you. And this is what I think is my very long-winded message behind this.
Yeah, I mean, I used to teach outdoor adventure, in further education at university, and one of the things that we used to always talk about was this comfort zone and the ability to understand that everybody has a different comfort zone. And more importantly, everyone has a different stretch zone in terms of where they are actually going to stretch themselves. And what is comfort for one is panic for somebody else. And, I've got an adventure business in the UK as well, where we kind of do, coast-steering and whitewater rafting and activities like that. And like I always say to my guides is like, if you get out there and, it does seem boring for you because you're in your comfort zone all the time, but actually to your clients, they are in their stretch, or they could be even in panic now. And like I said to them, like, if you're ever out on a coast-steering session, for example, and it's a bit choppy and, you're feeling in your stretch zone, then imagine what the clients are feeling at that point. Because actually now, if you're thinking, hang on a minute, this is a little bit, on the dodgy side, they're then potentially going to be in the panic zone where they're really going to be worried about it.
I so agree. And I think also people, we have within us this wanting to be perfectionist, of wanting to be good at stuff. And I think people are so also nervous that if their comfort zone is different to somebody else's, if they are scared when other people aren't, if they are struggling where other people might not be, that they feel that they're going to get looked down on, that they fear that somebody might think less of them, rather than acknowledging that we're all different. So some things might make us nervous, whereas other things won't. And it's that, I think I'm probably not articulating this very well. It's one of those things that we are all different, and to not be scared, don't be scared not to be perfect as well. I think that, especially amongst women, there is that thing that if we do something, we should be great at it. If you haven't done it before, then you shouldn't expect to be great at it. You need to learn it. You know that you could be scared. And the great thing is if you are with an instructor or a leader, there is somebody there who is there to help you as well and reassure you. And don't feel that makes you a lesser person either, because we all have to be there and we all have our own foibles, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it last week on, like I say, I was in Gozo scuba diving with a group last week. Half of them were learning to scuba dive. Half of the group were already qualified scuba divers who were just exploring the island. And one of the ladies who was learning to scuba dive, after day 2, she was like, this isn't for me, can't do it, don't like it, that's it, I've tried it. And then, I convinced her to go in, and learning to scuba dive is hard. Like there's a lot of things in there that are completely out of people's comfort zone to go and do. And you do need to learn the skills, but it's not the reality of scuba diving, if you like. And, I just managed to convince her to go out and do a try dive with one of the instructors, and just go out and feel what diving is actually all about, and have someone right next to you who's doing everything for you, and you can just concentrate on breathing and looking at the fish. And she came up from that and was like, I'm going to book to come back next year. Like, I really enjoyed that. Like, now I've seen what the end goal is, I'm happy to push myself through that learning to get to be able to do that. But I just think it's so important to try and, with groups and with people like that, give them other options so they can see the end result. Because, we want everyone to have a great experience. I mean, even if she'd come up from that try dive and said, no, that's still not for me, I didn't like it, but, that bit was all right, but I can't do that. At least she's leaving on a positive rather than leaving and going, I never want to get in, put a mask in, regulator, and again, that's me done.
That's it. And there is no shame, I think, also in trying something and deciding it's not for you. I think it makes you a stronger person for it as well.
Yeah, and it was interesting because she came back to me afterwards and said, if I come back, can I pay extra and have it on a one-to-one experience and learn with one instructor, so I'm not there in that group setting? And I think part of it again comes back to what we were discussing earlier, is she was struggling with some of the skills and then she felt she was holding the rest of the group back. So, and that's why she was then like, no, I'm done. It just kind of all spiraled for her. And it was like, no, I'm done now. And I think had she carried on, I think she would have been fine. But I think it was that pressure of the other two in the group are getting it and I'm not, and I'm holding them up and it isn't fair on them. And, and that's what kind of blew it for her in the end. So, yeah, because, she wants to come with us, we've already sorted it out. She can have her own instructor next year and she can go through it at her pace. But it's, she wouldn't have known that had she have done that experience in the first place.
Exactly. And I always say when I take a group out, I say, if you're feeling nervous that you're holding the group up, if you're feeling that things, you're not happy about something, let me know. Because sometimes you could be in a group totally unaware that somebody's feeling that way, because we're not seeing it at all. And if they say, oh, I'm struggling a bit, can we slow the pace down? Yeah, that's fine. Or how can we get over this? And I think that is one of the most wonderful things, because also by speaking out about it, it gives you confidence as well to go, well, this is what I would like, or this is what I'm doing, or this is where I am at the moment. And it also, I think, the group then ends up bonding even more over it, because you quite often you'll say, somebody else will then go, oh yeah, well, shall we have a little stop now, or should we do this, or should we do that? And it just, I don't know, people have a bigger fear of failing than you actually ever get, if that makes sense. You must see it too. That fear is massive. It's like, as a child, we all thought that quicksand was going to get us. It's not there, is it?
Yeah, and but it's it's a reality of life as well, isn't it? There is always going to be a slowest person in the group. Like, there is always going to be that one person at the back, and
Yes.
it might be you, but that doesn't actually matter. Like, I always say to my guys, like, we have, if we're doing a Tootcow trek, a Kilimanjaro trek, an Everest Base Camp trek, we have multiple guides, and there is always a guide at the back. And, if you want to be that slow person and you want to go at your own pace, then that is fine. Like, you don't get a different certificate for getting up the top of Kilimanjaro first or getting there last. Like, you get the same certificate. The important thing is you got to the top of Kilimanjaro. No matter how you got there, it kind of doesn't make any difference. And I quite like walking along at the back, like chatting away. Like, if I can have a conversation with somebody, and that's where you have those great conversations where, you're just walking along, enjoying it. I've got one of our clients, she could probably quite happily be at the front, but she's always at the back and she just stops and takes photos and enjoys the view. And that's part of her trip. It's not, the trip isn't about getting there first. It isn't about, rushing to get to the camp or rushing to get to the tea house. It's about enjoying the whole experience. And I think for so many people, they put their head down and, go on at this quick pace, but never actually look up and enjoy the view and think about where they actually are and what it is they're doing.
I think it's so sad when people do that, because we're not in a race. These trips we're doing are not races, obviously, unless they are marked as a race, in which case, but it's all about the experience. It's about looking at that sunrise. It's about taking a breath and smelling the flower as you go past. It's about capturing that moment so you can share it with family and friends. I'm not a fast walker in a group because I love to chat. There is something about chatting side by side with somebody that I don't know, you just create this bond, and then you talk to somebody else, and then you take pictures, and those are what you remember about a trip, rather than pushing on and trying to go quickly, which is why I find that most people I come across, they might start off thinking that they need to go quite quickly, and then suddenly the pace slows down as everybody goes, oh, let's take a picture, oh, shall we stop here, or let's have a little snack here, or and I think that's also what changes people's view about one of these treks. It's not about who's first or who's last. It's about having this wonderful experience as you go along.
Yeah, completely. And I think as well, like, don't be nervous if you think, oh, I need to stop and have a break, because the chances are there's somebody else that when you say, can we just stop for a break? There's a few people in the group who are going, oh, I'm glad someone asked that, because I really wanted a break at this point as well.
Yes, 100%. That's something we see a lot. The minute one person says, oh, I wouldn't mind a quick breather, suddenly you'll get at least one other person say, oh, can we stop? Yeah, that's a good idea. And sometimes I'll go, oh gosh, yes, I should have actually had a little break there. So always, and also when you're out having an adventure and you are taking in these wonderful vistas, you're challenging yourself. It's very easy to forget that self-care, that little stop and having some water, a little snack, something like that, which keeps your energy levels up. Because I mean, we've all got to the point where we've pushed on a bit and we've got a bit grumpy. I will admit I've done it before.
Angry.
That's the one. And it's that sort of self-awareness of going, oh, actually, I haven't had a glass, I haven't had a drink for a little bit, or I haven't had a little snack for a bit. That actually makes it even more enjoyable because you're fueling yourself as you go along.
And the one thing that I say to people as well, like, when we're walking along all the time, is, those people, especially on an altitude trek, the people that rush off and, because, you do have to walk slowly on an altitude trek. And for some people, it feels too slow for them and they think, oh, I could be walking far quicker than this. And, that they go on. But, they're also the ones that generally 4 days into the trek might struggle a little bit. And, it's that person at the back who's plodded along and enjoyed it that just carries on going, and they've given their body time to acclimatize. And, like I say to people, it doesn't matter if you get into camp an hour after the first group. It makes no difference. Like, it's your journey. You do it at your pace. It really doesn't matter. And I think, it's probably one of the biggest apprehensions that people have when they're thinking about booking a trip or going on an adventure like the Adventure Queen stuff is, am I fit enough? And, you'll never know until you go and try. That's the thing, and also as well, like, people generally book, especially for like, our style of trips, they book them quite far enough in advance that they've got time to get fit enough for them. They can go and join groups like Adventure Queens or walking groups, and suddenly, in the UK, they can go and do a day's trek and go, I struggled with that. Right, now I know what I need to do to get fit enough, because in 12 months' time, I want to do Kilimanjaro. Like, they've got time to get, anybody can get fit enough to go and do an Everest Base Camp or a Toubkal or a Machu Picchu trek, for example. Like, if you just sit there and, train for it, and, there's we've got loads of information on our website. The internet is packed full of information where, people can watch videos on YouTube. They can look at other people doing it. They can see the pace people are walking at. They can really do that research in that time and get ready to go and do a trip like that.
And it gives you that motivation as well to, especially if you think, well, I would like to get fitter. I think booking a trip, planning an adventure means you could think, right, I've got X amount of months to make sure that I'm fit enough to make the most of this trip. Because you don't want to be in a state that on the first day you literally feel like you're dying on your feet. You're not out there to run an ultra marathon, unless obviously you've booked it. So what you're looking for is something in between that you're going to get the most out of your trip by being fit enough to do it. And also what's really nice is you get fitter and you tend to lose a little bit of weight and you feel quite nice about yourself by the time you go anyhow, which is a slightly vain thing to say. But I think we all, when we go on holiday, when we go away, we like to feel and look our best as well. So it's that thing where you can get out and about, you can start to get a little bit fitter. You will probably also, as I find, a lot of mental health benefits from getting out walking, from getting more active, from actually feeling that you're making progress towards a goal as well. And also, if you join a group, you're going to get that new friendship. And also, you'll probably end up talking to somebody who's already done that trip as well, I would imagine, who will be able to give you some tips and give you some advice as well, and also give you that great motivation too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what would you say to someone who sat there listening to this, or reading one of your articles and go, well, it's too late for me to start?
I would say it's never too late. What you do may look very different to what you would have done in your 20s or 30s, but there's always something you can do. This is what's so great now, is there are so many providers, so many groups that no matter what your level, no matter what your ability, there is some way of finding a way, a path to achieving something. I mean, obviously we have to think what is feasible with the bodies that we live within, but there's nothing stopping us. I mean, as I said, I got my first pair of rock climbing shoes at the age of 50. When I was a teenager, I was terrified of heights, so I never did anything like that at all. And I mean, now I love scrambling. I go rock climbing. I've been caving. I've done all those things later on in life. I'm not great at any of them, but oh my gosh, I get so much fun out of it. I've met so many people. I've seen places that I never would have dreamed I could see. And so no, and also with Adventure Queens, I've met women in their 60s who've just bought their first tent. A woman who separated from her husband after, I think, almost, 40 years, something like that. And she was totally bewildered the first time I saw her, because obviously this had been her life for so long. And the last I saw, she was trekking across one of the coastal paths down in the Mediterranean. So I think this is the thing, is that know what you can do in terms of where you are and your abilities. Know that by getting out there, your abilities will actually improve. And then take little steps. Don't go and go mad with the first one if you've never done anything. I would start smaller. I say that little steps can get you one hell of a long way. So start small. Do a weekend trip. Do an hour's walk with some friends. Just start to build if you're worried, or else plan a big trip in a year's time, and then work out a plan of how you're going to get there and what you need to do to get there, so it gives you a goal. There's all sorts of different things. So yeah, I'm very passionate about you haven't left it too late. Never ever. I mean, people are climbing the Monroes in their 90s. My uncle who passed away, he was still riding a horse in his 90s. So I spoke to a specialist orthopedic surgeon who specialized in geriatric care. Our bodies keep replacing sort of, the tendons, the ligaments, they all keep renewing until we get into our 80s. And then obviously we just start to see a decline then. So there is no reason to sit down and go, oh, I've left it too late. You can tell I'm quite passionate about this, can't you?
Yeah, well, it's actually, just listening to you there, I realised that I've got to get a friend of mine on this podcast, because you were talking about taking up climbing. And Mark, one of my very good friends, Mark has one leg, doesn't wear a prosthetic. He's lost it. He had it amputated as a child, and he kind of has a stump now, sort of halfway along the thigh. And I own a climbing centre, so I've been trying to get Mark to come in and try climbing for years and years and years, and he was, no, I'm scared of heights. I'll never do that. That's not for me. And he came in and tried it one day and brought his kids in, and actually kind of, it did scare him, but he really, really enjoyed it. And Mark has one of those kind of addictive personalities. and really threw himself into climbing. And he's just been out. He's just been out at the World Paralympic Cup representing Great Britain for climbing, like 5 years after he started climbing.
That's exactly what it's all about, isn't it?
And it just suddenly, when you were saying then about climbing, I was like, I know someone that I need to get on the podcast, because he will hate coming on the podcast, because he hates all, public, and, the fact that he represents, Great Britain now, he doesn't talk about it, but, it's his driven goal that he wants to do it. But I'm definitely going to get Mark onto the podcast to talk about his journey, because I think, that's one I think that would really inspire others to get out there and try something.
I agree, and I have if you're worried about stuff, also look online, because social media, it has its downsides, but also look for role models, look for people like yourself doing amazing things as well. I always think you have to see it to be it. And if you see older people who are getting outside and doing inspirational things, follow them. If you're seeing people with disabilities who are doing amazing things, follow them. If you're whatever community you're from, whatever age you're from, whatever background you're from, religion, whatever, there are people out there. I mean, I see it with the Ordnance Survey Champions, which is why we do it, is so that we can go out and go, it doesn't matter what you look like, what your age is, what your shape is, anything like that. Just go out and try it.
And also, you work with the Access Forum within the Brecon Beacons National Park itself. What barriers do you see there are for people in getting into the outdoors?
It's transport. Transport is a big issue for people who are on lower incomes, who don't have access to cars, who don't have access to their own private vehicles. A lot of these beautiful places are by nature hard to get to. And yes, there are a certain number of bus services and train services that can get you to a certain point. But then after that, nobody wants to walk along an A road. I mean, you wouldn't want to, because you probably wouldn't get very far. But, this is the big issue we find, is actually opening up the countryside to everybody. And transport's the biggest issue. And then obviously, easy access routes. If you do struggle to get around, if you're in a wheelchair, if you have access problems, then styles are not particularly great. They'll stop a wheelchair in its tracks, obviously. So there are a lot of issues around that sort of area of how can we make the outdoors more accessible. And also, if you don't have white skin, then the outdoors can be very, very intimidating, because it is still very much a white area. It's traditionally. Now, we are seeing a lot more people, with black and brown skin coming up kind of van of going to some of the well-known places. But it's actually still a barrier, because again, if you are going up a hill and you look around and you don't see anybody who looks like you, that's intimidating too, and that is a big barrier still.
Yeah. So what changes then do you think would help more people enjoy the national parks and getting into the more remote places?
It's transport, but I mean, we all know the state of the transport network in this country. So I think to hope that we're going to suddenly get bus services to every single out of the way car park within the national park is not really feasible. The Sherpa buses, for instance, you see up in Snowdonia, and we get some buses in Van Abercwyniog. They are helpful to a certain point. But I think this is where I think groups can come in, because with Adventure Queens, we do a lot of car sharing. We try and work out how we can pull cars and meet people at stations, so that people who haven't got transport can actually get to some of these places. And so that, if you are struggling with transport, that would be my advice, is to look for groups where you can actually carpool, where you can chip in a little bit of money so everybody puts something towards petrol. And, if you grow friendship circles as well through doing outdoor adventures, again, you can then go, well, let's pool resources. One person could meet at the station, or one person could go there, or if you chip in together, you'll share the petrol with one person, and that reduces the cost. So for me, sometimes you have to take the initiative, because I think if we all wait for the powers that be to do it, we're probably not going to happen. I think in terms of the diversification of our outdoors, it's pressure, and it's people sharing images. It's going back to that, you can't be what you can't see. And I think this is where social media is doing a great job, because if you see somebody you identify with in the outdoors doing something, you are far more likely to do it yourself. I remember a story of an Olympic BMX rider, and he, as a child, saw a poster of somebody who he identified with, and he went, I could do that. And it never occurred to him till then that he could actually do that. And now he's an Olympic champion.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
definitely. I mean, obviously at the Bucket List Company, we're a group travel company. But what's your go-to adventure style? Are you more of a solo person, or would you say you are more of a group person, or do you see that both have their benefits?
oh, both. I think going by yourself, it stretches your boundaries, and you have to going on a solo through trek, I think, will often change you as a person in a different way to doing a group trek, because you face challenges of literally you have to make the decision and work out where you're going and how you're going to look after yourself and take full responsibility for yourself during that. With a group travel, as a participant in it, I just think they're wonderful, because you get to share your experiences with other people, and sometimes that is, in my mind, one of the most wonderful things to do. Is you are at the most beautiful place, you're looking at the most beautiful view, and you're sharing it with people. And that, you look around yourself, and sometimes I've been on Adventure Queens trips where I've looked around and just looked at everybody else's faces, and I'm actually getting emotional now thinking about it. And it is the best feeling in the world to have this joint experience, this joint heart lifting moment that you're all there and you're together with.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think also as well that camaraderie just spurs people on as well. Like on a long trek, multi-day trek, people are going to have a bad day, and just having other people around them to bring them on, and just makes such a difference, I think.
It does. You can get through a lot more as a group, because you can help each other. So everybody will have down moments at different times. You might hit a barrier, you're exhausted, and you still got a few miles to go, and somebody else will take your mind off it, or and really spur you on. And I just love that. And those are the things I think you remember a lot, for years and years to come. It's like, oh, do you remember that moment when you gave me that extra sweet, or you dangled some sweets in front of my nose as we were going along, saying, if you make it up that ridge, have them. It's that sort of experience that you will always remember. Sometimes the destinations fade, but it's the human contact and human shared moments, I think, that live on.
Yeah, and I think the other, you can go on a group trip as a solo traveler. I think that's the other thing, is a lot of our people who book their first trips with us, they come as a solo traveler and join the group. And, we did some research a few years ago, and, 70% of our customers booked their first trip, not knowing anyone and as a solo traveler. And instantly, you get into that group. But I think the important thing as well is to also realize that, just because you are on a group trip, there is plenty of downtime as well, where you can go and do the solo things as well if you want to. You can go off and explore on your own. and I always say to people beforehand, like, do your research on where we're going and what, in that free time that you've got, that afternoon off you've got, what are you going to go and do? Because, if you've already planned it before you go, the chances are it's going to happen. Whereas if you lose so much time, I always think, on a trip where you're like, right, what should we do this afternoon? And then by the time you've researched it, actually nothing ever happens because, you've spent all the time looking at what you were going to do. So I always try and encourage people to start off by thinking, right, you've got 2 or 3 afternoons in those places. What are you going to go off and do on that time? And you can go off and have those solo adventures yourself then as part of the group trip.
Definitely. And if you do that forward planning and look around and go, well, okay, just because I'm part of a group doesn't mean I'm not still an individual. So if you have free time or downtime, we quite often see, even on just a basic camp out, somebody will bring their bike and take it off for a route that they've already plotted. And that brings you so much more. So it might be that you sneak off for a sneaky massage, or it might be that to sort of soothe some sore muscles. But all of that sort of stuff has to be thought about in advance, and it means I think, by doing that, you get so much more out of the trip too, because you've got that me time, haven't you?
Yeah, and for some people, they'll just say, "I'm going off to do this afternoon. Does anyone want to join me?" They're opening it back up to the group as well. So it's entirely up to you whether you want your own downtime, if you want to join in with the group, if you just want to chill out. Some people, like you say, will go and book a massage. Think about Marrakesh or somewhere like that. People will go off and have a hammam and have a relaxing afternoon. Or some people want to go and see all the sights and go to the Gardens de Margial. And there's so many things in Marrakesh to do on your free afternoon, but it's entirely up to you what you want to go and do. And, if you want to go off solo and explore, you've got that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just priceless, isn't it? To take the time out for yourself.
Yeah, completely. And that's what I say to people. It is your trip. We get people all the time going, there's an excursion on, and they go, I don't want to do that. And you go, okay, you don't need to. Like, just because it's part of the trip, you don't have to go and do the city tour. You don't have to go and do that. It's entirely, it's your holiday. You decide what you want to do in that instance.
Yeah. And I mean, I would always say, if you're going somewhere, check out sort of the what's ons and the listings. Because one time I was abroad, and a friend, one of her favourite groups was playing, and she managed to sort out tickets to see them that night, and she was thrilled.
Yeah, exactly. People have even left the trip and gone and explored a completely different city for 2 days and come back and joined the group afterwards. Like, all those things are possible. You haven't got to stick all the time to the day. Obviously, if you're doing Kilimanjaro Everest Base Camp, your sort of itinerary sort of fairly well sort of put in. But, if you're doing like one of our best of trips and there's something, on your itinerary that you want to see in that city that's not on ours, and you want to do that more than what we're doing, you can go and do what you like. It's your holiday at the end of the day. You haven't got to, you can go off and have your own little solo adventure as part of the trip.
Yeah, you've paid for it, so you stay in control, really. You're not being
Exactly.
dictated to, and that's what I love, is that, don't worry about being slow. You've paid to be slow, basically.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. You've paid to take those photographs. You've paid to enjoy yourself. And so therefore, if something gives you joy, do it. I mean, obviously, within the bounds of common, but you know what I mean, don't you?
Well, Philippa, thanks ever so much for coming on to the podcast this week. I've really enjoyed chatting, and it's kind of, I love doing the podcast because we haven't really got any sort of schedule to it. It just is a conversation, and I never really know which direction a conversation is going to go in. And when we started off with this one, we said, yeah, we'll go for about 30 minutes, and we're 53 minutes in. So obviously that conversation flowed very well for us to get to this point. One question that I always ask any new person that comes onto the Bucket Lister website is podcast. Is what is on Philippa's bucket list?
Balkans.
There we are. You knew that one.
Yeah, I reported on the war in Bosnia. I want to go back, and I am planning on going back next year.
To do any adventure over there, or just to have a visit?
I'm looking at the Via Dinarica through Bosnia, which is a little known. Well, it is known in continental Europe, and people are starting to explore it more. So no, I'm looking at doing a couple of weeks along that, but also taking in a visit to Cluj, which is where I was based with the Welsh Cavalry. Because that was on the edge of a national park. And so if you imagine what Ukraine is like now, that was what it was like when I was there. And now there are pizzerias and campsites and tourists going there. So it'll be 30 years next year since I was out there. So I think it's time to go back, don't you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, maybe you can come back and we'll do another podcast when you get back and we can hear all about it.
I would love to.
Brilliant. Well, again, thanks ever so much, Phillipa, for coming on today. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. And it's been great and hopefully inspirational to you as well. You know, if you do have any fears about group travel or taking that first step into adventure, then hopefully, listening to this is kind of alleviated those and, giving you that sort of inspiration to just go and do it and try it. Because that's how we all start doing anything, is you kind of need to say yes and go and give it a go. So that's everything for this week. Like I say, hope you've enjoyed it. And I'll be back again next week with another episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. But until then, thanks very much and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.